This is the Lean Construction Blogs Podcast, a podcast dedicated to stories, case studies, and lessons learned of applying lean construction from around the world. Join Dick Beyer as he interviews industry leaders, lean construction practitioners, and subject matter experts to help you improve the build environment in general and your design and construction projects in particular, advance your lean journey, and bring your continuous improvement efforts to the next level. Let's get started.
Hey, good morning, fans of the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us at the podcast at leanconstructionblog.com. Happy to be back after a little holiday hiatus. And we've got a great lineup coming up this year, including today, the first of our 2021, 2022, where are we? 2022, I guess, podcast. It's so crazy that how all this time has gone by. And I am just delighted to be joined by Dr. Barbara Jackson, who is a good friend of mine, who is the dean of the director of the Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management in the Daniel School College of Business at the University of Denver. It's like one of the longest business cards you could ever have. But as the director, she was brave enough to hire me to come in and teach some lean construction management and some relational contracting courses when I was in Denver, and I just loved it. So Barbara and I go way back. She's got an amazing record. She has spent 20 years at least in construction industry before she began all this other stuff. She's been a member of the Design Build Institute of America. As a matter of fact, has been recognized by them as a Distinguished Leadership Award, Distinguished Service Award. She's got, if she was wearing the uniform, the cornucopia would flow off the sleeves. It's unbelievable. She's got a BS in housing and design. So hold that thought on design for a second. She has a master's in construction management, and she has a PhD in education and human resources with a specialization in technology of industry from the mighty Rams of Colorado State University, where Farouk Hamza used to teach, and he's a good friend of mine up here in Canada. She also provides construction consulting services. She is moving into a new role as she's leaving the directorship of the Institute or the Real Estate and Construction Management School over there at Franklin Burns. She's the author of a really well-selling construction management book called Construction Management Jumpstart. This never happens to people in our business. It's in the third edition already. So it's amazing. She wrote another book called Design Build Essentials. She's got like the greatest background of all time. And so with that long introduction, I welcome Dr. Barbara Jackson to the podcast. Hi, Barb.
Hey, Dick. So good to be with you today.
It's so great to see you. Thank you. Thanks for joining us from your ranch in Colorado, where I'm so envious since I'm a Western guy. So you've got all the kudos and you've got all the honors and the degrees. Before that, how did you meander yourself into construction? What's a colorful story in your background?
Oh, wow. I get that question a lot. How'd you end up in construction, right? I used to get it as a young person because it was so rare to see a woman. I was referred to that woman often when I was in the business, and they'd ask me. And frankly, it wasn't that difficult, really. It really was. My dad was a carpenter. My stepfather was an electrician, right? I've got no sisters. I've got all brothers. We all lived around the place because my parents divorced and all that stuff, how that goes. And so I just was really attracted to that work or hanging out with my dad or my stepfather because it just seemed a lot more interesting. So frankly, I think, I remember sawdust and the smell of wood being cut and all kinds of things and the sound of a power saw in my head all the time. And it just sort of seemed natural to me. And honestly, again, I ended up in college by fluke almost. And I started as a fine arts major because I was good at two things. I was good at art and I was good at math when I came out of high school. And so I I preferred the art. So I went and became a fine art major at Colorado State University for one full quarter. Realized I had no talent whatsoever and changed to what was then interior design. And I said, why in the world would I want to go work on a project that somebody else had already messed up?
Right. Yeah.
So I said, this isn't going to work. So I was an interior design major for a grand total of one quarter. And then I stumbled across this major, which was this hodgepodge called housing and design. Well, the housing piece was about, more like policy kind of things. And the design piece did teach me fundamental principles of design, and I had to take drafting and all that stuff. But in it were a couple majors, were a couple courses in a major that was brand new back then. And it was called, this was like 1972-ish, 73-ish, and it was called ICM, Industrial Construction Management. And I ended up having to take one or two electives over there and ended up taking their whole curriculum.
Wow.
So that's really how I got into it, a family background, and then kind of stumbling my way through the university to figure out what I wanted to take, so to speak, as a major. And what's fascinating about that today, Dick, that's still the same way some people find the construction management program at a university. Even though it's been around this time, we get students in and say, well, I didn't know you guys existed.
Right.
I was over in engineering, and they said, you really should look at construction. And they said, what? There's a degree in construction.
Right.
And that's still where we are. But that's kind of how I found it. I just stumbled onto it.
So had you worked as a carpenter or an electrician or anything before school or after school, or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, obviously, like I said, I was around it a lot because my dad was a carpenter. My stepfather was an electrician. I got to hang out with both of them. I literally, would go on job sites and clean up stuff and all kinds of things when I was a kid. And then not through high school, so other than just helping with a project here and there.
Right.
But really, it was the time period after I graduated from the university, frankly, that I actually went on. It was fascinating because I had actually a good job at that time, classified as a good job, offered to me in Denver, Colorado, right after I graduated. And this was like in January, I was graduating in June. So I had that job in pocket.
Right.
And prior, I had applied to what was called VISTA back then, VISTA Volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
So VISTA is Volunteer in Service to America, which today is kind of like the AmeriCorps kind of model, right?
Yeah, it was kind of the domestic Peace Corps, I think we used to call it.
Yep, that's what they used to call it. And so I already had this job, and I'd applied to VISTA, and the job with VISTA, at first they said, we don't have anything for you. And then this is like a month, maybe 3 weeks before I was graduating. And they said, they called me and they said, we found a slot for you in Tucson, Arizona. And it's at the Tucson Design and Development Center. And we'll pay you like a $238 a month stipend and all the hard work you can stand.
So that was real money back in those days.
Yeah, and let me back up. So I put down I said, let me call you back in 5 minutes. So I got off the phone. I paced in front of that phone like for 5 minutes. I called him back and I said, I'll take it. Because I was so excited. I wanted to get out of, I wanted to travel. I wanted to go do some things. And the toughest call, 2 tough calls. I had to call that person I had begged for the job for in Denver.
Right.
And say, thank you, but no, thank you. I've changed my mind. They were quite upset. And then I had to call my mother and tell her that I decided to turn down a good paying job to go on this adventure. where I was going to get to work in the field. I was going to get to work with the city of Tucson. I was going to get to work with the Papago Indians. I was going to get to work with doing all kinds of funky projects like the Privy Project to build 1,000 outhouses for the Papagos because, they didn't want the bathrooms inside their residence. They wanted them outside the residence. So these modern day outhouses, and I got to do that. I set tile and I laid brick and I poured concrete and I did all kinds of things.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And thank you for your service to America, by the way. That's a pretty cool thing. So you did that for a few years and then went back to your degree in construction management. Is that what happened? Or did you
I was the only, and what's fascinating, great conversations during that time, met some really good friends, but there I go, right? But they were architects. They were very good friends, but they were architects. You with me? So I was the only construction management person in that office. Everyone else was an architect. And I had a very dear friend. We had two, the old drafting tables. Nothing was on CAD. So it was the drafting tables face to face.
Right.
She's on one side, I'm on the other. She's drafting and drawing and designing, and I'm calculating and doing budgets and estimates, right? And I'd look over at her and I'd say, you're like $180,000 over budget. And she'd say things to me like, well, that's their problem, not mine. And I said, no, I said, it's your problem. And she said, well, I can't be creative on a budget. And I remember saying to her, Dick, no, you can only be creative when you're on a budget, because it doesn't take any damn creativity to be creative when you don't have a budget. And
I have asked people, does anybody want to be on a project that doesn't have a budget? And people have held their hand up and I went, what fun would that be? What challenge are you solving?
Exactly.
I mean, what are you doing? You can just wander around in the universe for 100 years, if you didn't, if there wasn't a constraint. And I think that's what's important about target value design or target value delivery is you have to design to constraints in order to be able to get to the value proposition, right? Which is
exactly. And that's because you can't define value otherwise. I mean, that's some of the fascinating stuff. But even back then, that mentality, and honestly, and another thing she said to me one day, she said, well, in architecture school, we are taught how to think. And I said, outside of architecture school, nobody needs to teach you how to think. You already know how to do it for yourself.
Right.
Back and forth, teasing each other. But eventually I decided that I needed to head. My next jobs were actually one in engineering, which I learned infrastructure and water and sewer and street design and all that stuff. And then I went on to work for the rest of my career in the construction side of the business. So it's kind of like I went architecture, engineering, construction to end up where I was always going to end up. And again, a lot of people ask me what drew me to design build, and what it was is I thought, how can you ever build something if you don't understand the intention of design? And how can you ever design something if you don't understand how to build something? So for me, it always just made common sense. I said, why would you do it any other way than doing it as an integrated process? And frankly, Dick, my story is that got in my brain when I was in as a sophomore in college, and it played out the first part of my career. And I said, this is it. This is my career. Before there was a DBIA, I was adamant that an integrated design and construction process was the only smart way to deliver design and construction services. And that's kind of how it literally has made a career for me.
Well, and one of the things I've loved about your career is that you've been focused, and we've had these deep conversations, at the conferences that you've held and in your office over a glass of wine, about how important it is to think about the built environment.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of schools. I remember that you were thinking about trying to change the name of the Burns faculty to, the Burns School for the Built Environment. You had some issues with the family. kind of going, oh, how can we change the name? It's like our baby. Well, change your name and be your baby all the time. But it's interesting. And one of the things I love about you, and I loved working at DU, was because other people have tried this built environment thing, right? Renee Chang has the School for the Built Environment up at the University of Washington, and she's a great resource in our community. But it starts with architecture, right? And it's because it's in the architecture school. And I remember we were talking to CU, they have an architecture school. And they said, well, how can you do this without us? And we're going, well, pretty easily, because you grounded the discussion around the built environment at a business school.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is exactly where it belongs. It doesn't belong in some realm of academia that's on a cloud someplace. It's like, all right, let's get down to business. And the integration that I loved when I was at DU, working with you and your team, was that you were developing developers who had an understanding of how construction had to be managed. And you were doing that big, wild, city blocks worth of redevelopment project just west of Broadway that I want to talk about. But those were the things that really draw me to how important your role has been, because you've structured it from that. Well, there's no value if you don't build it, right? There's no value just in a design. I mean, there's some really beautiful elevations out there that could be in art museums, but that's maybe if you had an original Mies van der Rohe sketch or something, there might be some value there. But in general, unless you build it, that's why I love your phrase. What is your phrase? It's not just construction, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's just construction. Oh, yeah, we'll worry about that later. So then you came back and you got after you had your master's in construction management, you came back to CSU and you got a PhD in education and human resources, which I find really fascinating, because it is one of the things that is the biggest challenge for us, is kind of the people side of what we're trying to do, teaching them and hiring them and managing them and all that. How did that come to pass?
Well, again, for me, when I was in business for myself, and the name of the company that I had was called Design Build Services Incorporated. Mm-hmm. And we had a tagline, and that tagline was, when you serve people, you don't have to sell them anything. And the thing I kept noticing in all of my jobs as I would go through my career was the idea that, it's when I'd say to the architect, the project's over budget, they'd say that's their problem. That's right. Their problem, as if whoever they are out there, like they're called the client and the owner, that they somehow, that's their problem. I don't work for them. I'm going to create something magnificent for them, and they're going to take it or leave it, kind of a thing. And it just kept really bothering me that, wait a minute, what is this about anyway? Isn't this about delivering projects to clients? And the notion was clients don't really know what they want. And I always argued against that. I said, yes, they do. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to express that. But I'm telling you, if you ask the right questions, you're going to find out exactly what they want. And what you're really bad at is asking those right questions, because you're more concerned about telling them what you want instead of listening for what they want and digging deep enough to find out what that is. So this notion again of, it's about the people side of it, not the process side. And I had a great conversation with a director of innovation at a large national construction company this past year. And I remember him saying to me, and they're looking at taking integration, for example, to the next level. And when we were talking, he said, Barb, one of the challenges we have is every time we come up with something innovative, it's never around people. It's always a new spreadsheet, right, or a new piece of software, or some new technique, or even a piece of equipment, right? But he said, it's never around the mindset. It's never around the people. It's never around the culture. It's never around those things. So Dick, I mean, you know, your comments about the built environment and your comments about, you know, the people side of the business and why I was attracted to that and how I ended up there in human resources is because for me, it still boils down to, you know, the big picture of everything. And nothing exists in the built environment without construction and what we do, number one. It's not architecture till somebody builds it. When people think it's just construction, it drives me nuts. And then they think of the construction worker, and that's even worse. You know, that's like all brawn, no brains. And I have met some of the most creative people I've ever met on the face of the planet are in construction. And the thing that really bothers me is we never tap into that resource for the resource it really is.
Right.
And if you want to find significant innovation, just look to the field itself, look to the construction folks themselves. They'll tell you 10 better ways to do this. And nobody asks and nobody listens. So for me, the bigger picture of the built environment combined with the human side of this business is what's always attracted me. It's never been the concrete and steel that attracted me. It's been its impact that it has. Again, nothing exists without it. No healthcare, no housing, no recreation, no education, no energy, no nothing exists without construction. Right. And yet it's viewed as sort of this insignificant thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. You go outside and you spin around 360 degrees and you just look at every single thing you see, from the sidewalk to the buildings, to the landscaping, for heaven's sakes, to all of it. And it's all done by construction hands.
Well, and all the things that you can't see, the sewers and the electrical lines, the cable and everything that powers. I mean, our ability to do this was because somebody, you know, dug a hole in the street someplace and put some fiber cable in, except maybe in our instance where we may still be on the old orange juice can waxed line here because our in a bit. Well, I have spent a lot of time. As a matter of fact, I just asked one of my friends in Toronto last week who his favorite anthropologist is, and people don't ever talk about who's your favorite anthropologist. But one of the things you and I talked about when I was at DU was how do we expand out to all of the other departments in the social sciences and bring what they know about the people side into the built environment? Because we tend to, we're probably the worst industry in terms of siloing things. And I blame the lawyers for, you know, trying to get us, you know, to sell risk to people in this kind of crazy fallacy that you can sell risk to people and that the owner's never really going to be responsible for it. Because at the end of the day, you know, the owner's always responsible for the risk of all these things. And we should be managing risk and not selling it, for God's sakes. We should welcome risk because risk is what actually drives us to innovation. When I was a lawyer, I was crazed. People would get into these massive nuclear litigations. I mean, because construction litigation is not just the carpenter against the guy that did the windows. I mean, you bring in the whole project, right? And I thought, why would they do things like estimates and schedules and things when they could actually know all of these things? They just were making these things up, and they were largely making them up to salve the owner's, you know, fears about whether the thing was going to be done on time. And they could have just gone and asked people. And that's what I like about the integration piece, whether it's design build or it's integrated project delivery or whatever. You have everybody on the project early on, so you can ask them those things. You know, you don't have to make assumptions about stuff, and assumptions are what kill us.
Yeah, and you know, Dick, the other thing about that, and I've always said about teams is, you know, good teams, they don't come in with the answer. They discover the solutions as they engage. Right. And because everybody's got different levels of expertise and experience and all kinds of information, that if you put big challenges in front of an integrated team that has different, like a cross-disciplinary perspective, and you just put that challenge on the table. At first, everybody's going to do, they might say, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Nobody can figure that out. And then you'll see them move in towards the challenge. And I always watch the body language. Are they moving toward the table where I just slapped down the challenge? Or are they moving away from it? And when I see them move towards it, it's like, oh, it looks impossible. And then they go, but how would we do that? And nobody has the answer. And I love coming into a space where nobody's got the answer. And if they think they've got the answer, I make them leave the room and come back in again, because I say, you come in not knowing, please, because you're no use to us just putting on the table what you already know. This is too complex. It's too challenging. And you cannot find the solution by just looking in what you already know. And Dick, that is the power of these teams. That's the power of the integration.
Right.
If they can get their mind open enough. But here's something else you may not have heard me say before, but I'll say it here. You know, the first thing you got to get individual people on the team to get, they got to get that the project's not about them. It's not about you. Hey, guess what? It's not about you. It's not about you being right. It's not about you getting your way. It's not about you. And you ought to see the stunned faces when I first say that. It's not about me. It's like, oh my goodness, somebody caught me. And we can't get over ourselves, you know? And that's why I hate the labels.
Right.
Architect, engineer, contractor. I hate them because it's kind of like you're so tied up in that identity. You know, it's like you couldn't find genius if it hit you in the face, because you're so wrapped up in your own identity that that's the one, and you're the right one, and you're the one with the right answers. Well, I don't want that team.
Right.
You know, what was that hockey movie where the coach asked or the player or whatever asked the coach, he said, you know, coach, you're not picking the best players. And he says, I don't want the best players. I want the right players.
Right.
And I never forget it, because I said, bingo, I want the right people on this team. And Dick, that's the opportunity we have when we get to be an integrated a group, an integrated team, as we get to have that collective genius.
Right.
And they discover a solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's a powerful image. I mean, there's 4 or 5 things about what you said that just kind of raced through my mind. But it's a powerful image that the person who leans into the problem and starts to doodle on a piece of paper, everybody at the table gets up and starts to surround that person to see what is beginning to evolve. It's a huge, it's such a wonderful moment of human.
Yes.
You know, this is what distinguishes us from baboons and chihuahuas, I guess, is that chihuahuas hardly ever circle around a guy the chihuahua that's, you know, pawing in the ground, which is fantastic. But the other thing that it really struck a chord with me about is the whole concept of labels and these traditional heuristic biases that people have. That, like, I mean, general contractors are just as bad as everybody else. The trades, they can't. Right?
Yep.
And the trades are, well, you know, everybody's trying to get into my pocket. That's not going to happen. And the architects are going, I have no idea how I make money. I don't know. It's not really a business. It's like a calling, you know. And you go, whoa. Let's reorganize everything right here. Let's think about who is the person that actually puts that building up. It's a trade.
Yeah.
Typically, right? So those buildings don't exist because some CM was able to manage these hooligans. They exist because these people love what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, in the summer of 1969, I was a sheet metal apprentice for J.A. McDonald and Sons on 500 South Calumet in Denver. And I was crawling into attics and I was pushing swamp coolers up on top of roofs, and we were building 40-foot ductwork for the Fitzsimmons Radiation Clinic. And it was just like the most amazing thing ever that you could actually do that, even bending gutter and installing it on a roof. was remarkable to me. And I think that we are all, whether you're architects, owners, CMs, you're all in service of the trades. You're
Yes,
all in
yes.
service of the people who do the work.
Yep.
And our job is to make their job easier.
Yeah.
Make sure that they don't have people in front of them, make sure that they have stuff that they need to have at the site when they're doing the work, make sure they don't have to walk to their car to get a screwdriver. We need to, that's the stuff where we can think about really integrating these things. And I think these ideas are hugely powerful as well. So you've carried that through in your teaching. I know that when you were at San Luis Obispo, you were much loved there, and people were, wailing that you were leaving to come to the University of Denver, because I think you really hit a stride with people there, both in the integration piece and, in design build. So tell us a little bit about those days in San Luis Obispo, what you kind of learned there and how that's influenced what you've been doing.
Sure. So I think the first thing is you got to understand that I never truly set out to be a teacher or a professor. I was in the construction business. I had my own company. I had great success. And honestly, I got a little bored. So because it's kind of like you've been there, done that. So, okay, here we go again. Here's the next building. And yep, you break ground, you clear the site, you dig the foundation, you put up the floor system, the wall system. Okay, now we're going to do it again. Now we're going to do it again. Now we're going to do it again. So I actually called an old professor and I said, what would it take for me to teach at a university? And that's when he said, you got to have a master's, and today you really have to have a PhD. And in my world, I'm thinking, what is that? Post-hole digger? What does that stand for? I have no idea. So I went and did that, Dick.
That's a tough job, post-hole digger, actually.
Yeah, it took me 3 years to shut down my business. It was easier to start it than to shut it down, because you've got to juggle all the cash flows and everything else. But I did that to go back to school. So I went back to the university to get my master's and my PhD at Colorado State so I could teach, right? And the idea was that my first inkling was that I was going to stay at Colorado State. And I got to tell you this story because it's just fascinating. How I ended up at Cal Poly, because I never applied for the job, ever, never applied for it. So what happened was I am at Colorado State, I'm doing my graduate work. I'm focused 100% on developing skills to help me teach, learn to teach. That's an amazing thing when you think about it. If you think that professors don't actually need a degree in education to teach. They don't need to know anything about teaching to go become a professor. You should all know that. I just happen to want my PhD to be in education with an emphasis in construction. But, that's what I learned how to do. I learned about teaching theory and all that stuff, but set that aside for now. So there I am getting this degree, and my intention is to stay at Colorado State. Well, what happens is Jim Roger, the department head of Cal Poly Construction Management in San Luis Obispo, California, hears me speak on this integration of design and construction out in Portland, Maine, somewhere at an ASC conference or something, Associated Schools of Construction. And I'm giving a presentation. I'm telling them about what I'm developing and the new curriculum I'm developing, and around this notion of design build or integrated project delivery or whatever you like to call it. And I get home from this conference, and his senior faculty member calls me, Dick. His name, it just left me. His senior faculty member calls me, and Matt Wall. Matt Wall calls me and he says, Barb, so Jim Roger wants you to call him. And I go, okay, why? He says, well, here's the deal. All of the department heads of the top schools in the ASC have agreed no one can call you. None of these department heads can call you until you're done with your dissertation. You're a woman, number one. Number two, you got 25 years of experience in construction. Number three, you're going to have a PhD. That body doesn't exist in the universe.
Right.
You're going to be able to name any place you want to go. Woman, 25 years experience, PhD, does not exist. You're it. So they've agreed among themselves, a gentleman's agreement, that none of the department heads will call you. So Jim said, Matt, call her and ask her to call me. Then I can get around this. So I call him and he goes, Barb, I've got a job for you and it's yours or nobody's. What will it take to get you here? And I said, what are you talking about? I said, what are you talking about? I said, that's California. I said, I know two things. San Francisco, too expensive. LA, don't want to be there. He said, no, you got to at least come look. And it was my husband, Wayne, who said, Barb, when somebody makes you that kind of offer, you got to go. And I said, okay. Well, San Luis Obispo is a beautiful place, by the way.
Yeah.
Many of you know it's referred to as the jewel of the Central Coast, right? And Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, is referred to the jewel of the CSU system. Great. That's wonderful. But Colorado isn't too bad either. So it wasn't San Luis Obispo or even Cal Poly as an institute, because I didn't know it. It was the students. When I got there, and bless his heart, Jim Roger did what he always does, tries to catch you unprepared. He says to me, because I said, do you want me to prepare anything? He said, no, don't prepare anything. I said, okay. Then he gets me in front of this big room and he says, Barb, why don't you get up on the stage and tell us if you... And so I go up there and I start talking about this notion of integrated design and construction. And then he says, does anybody have any questions? And the whole room surrounded me. They were like 6 inches from my face asking me questions.
Right.
And I still get goosebumps. I went back to the hotel room and I said to Wayne, I said, that's it. I'm coming to Cal Poly. These young people want to suck the knowledge right out of you. Right. They're so hungry. And Dick, what I found is so hungry for this integrated notion. This was a college of architecture that had construction, architectural engineering, city and regional planning, architecture and landscape architecture, all in one college. And it's like all of them wanted that notion of integration. So what I got to do at Cal Poly was to develop that integrated curriculum, was to develop design and construction curriculum. Now, I have to say it's gone by the wayside a little bit because you got to have a champion for these things.
Right.
And once I left, it kind of lost its champion, but it can happen at any university, frankly. It's just, you got to have that champion. But that was my thing. I got to build a design build curriculum. I got to create an integrated project delivery minor. I got to have civil engineers, architecture students, archi students, planning students, construction students in my classes there. And it's where I wrote the book, Construction Management Jumpstart. It's where I wrote the book, Design Build Essentials. I got to put into education those things I was passionate about, but I say got to put in there. What I got to do really is expose young people to a new way of thinking about this business. Right. I had to fight for it, Dick. I had to fight the academic senate to get this curriculum. And this
crazy.
It's crazy. And I'll give you an example. So at first it was called the design build minor, and then it got shot down because architecture would not let construction use the term design. I said, wait a minute, you don't own the word design. I said, no, you can't use it. You can't use it. You can't use it. You can't say that you know anything about design. I'm like, oh my God. And so Dick, this was 10 years before IPD.
Right.
10 years, right? Before the IPD group in California got together and created little IPD and then big IP. So I said, what if we call it integrated project delivery? And they said, oh, we're great with that. And I thought, you idiots, you just gave me the name that you're going to want in 10 years.
Right.
And that's just what happened. But I've always been about 10, just so you know, I've always been about a decade ahead.
Yeah, no, I feel that way myself about when you were speaking about innovation, innovation is really low associative barriers, right? There's something over here and there's something over here, and people never put them together.
Exactly.
And when you put them together, you go, oh, well, that's interesting. And I was talking to Mark Seachy about this on another podcast. And we were talking about that's what he's trying to do with information. What kind of information do we get over here, and how is it affected by this information? Because really, the thing that I've learned in the last 70 years, I guess, is that everything is a system, whether you want it to be a system or not. It turns out to be a system. And if the system doesn't work, there's going to be pressure on the system in all kinds of places. And why, for God's sakes, would you put artificial pressure on it? Like, well, I'm the general contractor and you're not, so I'm going to do this. And you go, well, that's not how the system works, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I was so thankful to you that I got to teach that the IPD course at DU, and I was blown away when I was asked to be the keynote speaker at that ASC thing in Nevada, where they have that competition every year, and we took a team out there and kicked everybody's butt in the IPD coming out of the box. So that was a big thrill. I felt like we were really making hay while the sun was shining. So I thank you for that.
Well, so, that was great. Yeah.
So this segues really nicely into your role, having, as Jim Rogers said, you're a woman, you got 25 years of experience in construction. Now it's 35 or 40 years of experience in really in the built environment. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's construction necessarily. It's the changing of the landscape, for the better. And I know at DU you've done some really amazing things. But talk about your work with your boot camp for women in construction and drawing, the other half of the population into something that we do. This is always the thing that made me crazy about discrimination. If you say, well, we're gonna, a woman can't do this job, you have limited yourself to 48.7% of the population. Who would do that? What kind of craziness is that? But tell us about your role in that, because you've had a really significant role in that.
Yeah. So thanks for asking about it. But I'm committed. I mean, what I'm really up to is I'm my whole career, my intention has been to transform the culture and the leadership in this industry that I love, the industry of the built environment, the business of the built environment. That's what I love. Because again, nothing would exist without it. I come from that. My family, is sawdust in their hair and wood shavings in their cuffs of their pants, right? that is my background. So I love it. But it's, my thing, and I wrote a blog called "It Is Broken and It's Time to Fix It."
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about, the culture and the leadership. So the transformation. So that's my intention as I go, as I'm teaching, as I'm speaking, as I'm consulting. What's my intention? My intention is to transform this industry that I love. That's my intention. So as I'm doing that, and I'm thinking about it every day of my working life, I started to notice that it seemed that women had a capacity to move us and lead us and manage us on teams, for example, into this more transformative state of culture, where people's opinions were number one, they were asked for, number one, and number two, and oftentimes they were heard and heeded in some form or fashion to come up with a better solution.
Right.
So I noticed that women were not stuck on the way it had always been done. And it probably comes from them feeling like they don't know enough. They don't know enough about construction. So we're going to listen and learn, listen and learn, listen and learn. And I noticed that by them listening and learning, they actually knew far more, but they knew how to solve problems even better. So what happened about 6 years ago, I said to myself, I said, women are the key to the transformation. Women in leadership is the key to the transformation of this industry.
Right.
This has never been a gender thing for me, Dick. It's not women against men. It's just what's going to be the fastest way to transform us into this magnificent industry that we've always been capable of, but no one's led it that way.
Right.
I said, it's going to be women. It's going to be women. So that's why I started to focus these boot camps. So we have these women in construction leadership boot camps, which are now called Women Building Change Leadership Boot Camps. And so I started that about 6 years ago. We've been doing them 2 to 3 every year since we started. We've had probably 160 women from 58 different companies go through the boot camps. They're 3.5 days long, and the boot camp content would be no different if it were men, quite frankly. It's just that I'm focusing on women because I truly believe that they fill the gap between the leaders that we have and the leaders we need for this moment in time. And you're right, we've got a workforce issue. Women now make up just over 50% of the workforce. It's 50.9 or something. That happened in 2021. It just clicked over 50%. How can you expect to staff the workforce needed for this industry if, again, you're leaving out half the workforce? Right. And it's not just that. There's something that's referred to, I didn't create this, but I've learned about it, called gender intelligence. And this notion that the only thing we got to do is add numbers. So we just got to get more women. Well, that's a fallacy. If you just get more women, but they don't stay, you've done nothing. You're going to go right back to your stereotypical kind of conversation. Well, this business is too tough for women. Women don't like this business. It's too hard. No, that's all bullshit.
Right.
That's just bullshit. And here's the thing. Because you only focus on the numbers and you don't focus on creating a culture in which everyone who works for you can excel, and you only focus, we've got the count up, minorities, women, whatever you want. If you really think that just getting numbers is going to work for you, you have your head so deeply in the sand, it's not funny. And you're never going to solve this, because that's part of the issue, is attracting though the diversity you're looking for. But the other piece of it, you've got to create an environment in which all people can use the gray matter between their ears. Right. This take my command and control, do what I say, this is the way we've always done it, is going to kill off all of your people, including the young men who are leaving the industry in droves. Right. I mean, in droves, excuse me. They're leaving as well. They get up to 35 years old, the men do, and they're kind of like, yeah, there's no there. There's no innovation, there's no change, there's no improvement. It's just the same old grind. There's better ideas, there's better ways to do this business, and nobody's leading that path. And you're going to lose the men as well. And it's kind of like, wake up as an industry and learn how to lead such that people are engaged to come up with the solutions the industry needs and is looking for. But it's like this culture, such this big old gorilla sitting in the path, and it just drives me crazy. But I got to tell you, the women building change boot camps, big success. I can't tell you the transformations in there's going to be these women already, Dick. Already, we're actually having a reunion in June. Because I got to bring together, we've got some industry game-changing initiatives being started by women who are in this business that would knock your socks off. And that's all I can say is you haven't seen anything yet. Because it's taken 6 years, almost 6 years, but there's something astir. And this is the thing. It started out with women coming in. You know, I've I've tried to get a promotion for 4 years. 5 guys I work with, they've all been promoted. I'm still here. And we looked at all that stuff, right? So we now got that. We got that kind of movement. But now it's like, okay, I'm not okay with this as an industry, and I want to see some change here. And now they're like rolling up their sleeves and saying, all right, this is what I'm going to work on for the next 50 years. And I'm telling you, it's game changing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is really the from the standpoint of, this is why I asked the question about, who's your favorite anthropologist? It wasn't just one of my usual, jokes. It really is about the 4 things that make a culture, a different kind of language, different artifacts, things that you value, understanding what the values are that you have. Is the value that if I'm going to be a superintendent, I have to drive 185 miles to work and back every single day. I mean, I don't know a single woman that would take that job. That's crazy. And what are the things that we teach? And the fact is that we need people who understand how to assimilate, how to listen, how to turn that into an articulation of what's happening, so that everybody understands. And I think that the men as well as women are timid in this industry because they're afraid to say the wrong thing and not act like they're a team player. And I mean, that's led to all kinds of terrible things: alcoholism and domestic abuse and terrible lives for people, in addition to people getting hurt on jobs and work not going very well. And us saying 75% of hitting budgets and 75% of hitting schedules is good enough. We're okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes me crazy when people say, almost all the projects I've worked on have hit budget and have hit schedule. And I say, well, that's probably because you manipulated the schedule and the budget was too high. So how many of them have finished at absolute zero? How many of them have finished in the time it should have taken to build them for the money that it should have cost to build them? And you need bright minds thinking about that. And you need the whole populace, right? As you said, you got to bring that in. So congratulations on that work. You've also done, so I want to get back to this, the Collaboratory that you developed at the University of Denver. I mean, I've met so many smart people through you. Avery Bang was like a knockout from my perspective. I mean, when you talk about team building events, go build a bridge in Honduras that saves women largely in this village 10-mile walk a day to just get water to bring to their family.
Yeah.
Across the bridge. I mean, these are people that you naturally attract. I mean, you are the honey that attracts the Rex Millers and the Mark Conchers and the Avery Bangs of the world, and the guy from the guy that was working on that big CityCraft,
John Knox.
John Knox, yep. Those guys, and you got me in your web too. I mean, I was all over it. This is awesome. How do you do that? What's this magnetism? I mean, you talked about working for 6 years to develop this thing, the Collaboratory you've been working on for at least that long. You just have like the patience of Job, and you just keep your arm against your shoulder against the wheel. It's amazing. Where do you find the energy to do that? Well, tell us about the Collaboratory and all this stuff.
So the Collaboratory, again, it's an idea I first had when I was at Cal Poly. And the Collaboratory is part collaboration space, part classroom, part innovation center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the integration of knowledge, right? It's how do we learn? We don't just learn by lecture, and actually hardly anybody learns by lecture anymore. So it's like, how do we create a space, a classroom, if you will, that incorporates or allows for learning to occur through the actual engagement and collaboration, not just people talking at you. But Dick, it's that notion of what do we do when we bring a bunch of people not knowing anything together and put a challenge in front of them, and they start to discover for themselves. I'm going to go research this, or this triggered something in my brain. Just like our conversations, we trigger each other constantly, right? To think about something different, a new this, or I've never looked at that. Let me go look at that and see how it fits with this. And that's the whole idea behind the Collaboratory. The Collaboratory is a classroom for the 21st century, if you will, for teaching subjects of the built environment, right? Or teaching about the built environment. And it's taken me a little over 6 years to finally get the university to give me a space to renovate, to remodel. I finally got that a year and a half, 2 years ago, to raise the money. I'm still not quite there, but I'm very, very close. And we've been able to start construction. We'll actually complete construction by the end of February on my Collaboratory. Again, started at Cal Poly way back when. So I was at Cal Poly 15 years. I'm at DU now 8 years. And that's how long it's taken to get this project off the ground, which is nothing more than a space to learn in that replicates how we should be doing this business.
Right.
It's like, how did it take me 20 some odd years to get a university to understand that space matters? Isn't that what Rex taught us? I mean, that's where you and I met, Dick.
Absolutely.
In one of Rex's Space Matters things. And that really triggered me. Yeah. I'm like, of course it matters. So let's create spaces in which we can actually teach people how to engage the way we want them to engage once they leave this university and go do business. And so here's the thing. It took me that long, but why? Again, it's all for me. It's about, it truly is this notion of transforming this industry. But here's why. What's underneath all that, honestly, is nothing more than the dignity of mankind. Right. I mean, it's just that little thing, little thing called the dignity of mankind. Would you please free up the humanness of people and their brains and let them be an expression of all that they could ever create on this universe and this earth in their lifetime? Can we not be creating spaces that would allow for that? So what keeps me going, Dick, is that, quite frankly, that's how I have the patience, because I actually believe we can do that. We can actually do this. We can change this. We can make it better. We can actually do it. And you just have to push rocks uphill for lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of years. But it's also why I'm also leaving the university. I don't have that many years left.
I know. I
gotta do this. I gotta do this again, Dick, faster.
I'm older than you are, and I'm trying to, first I wanted to invent a company, and we invented the Realignment Group, which was really very successful. And I wanted to invent an institute. So I got into LCI and I got that cranky and moving in the right direction. And now that I'm in Canada, I want to reinvent a country. So come join me in our quest, because we're having a positive influence in how people in Canada are thinking about how they deliver things, and it's got a population less than California, so it's actually manageable. But all of this stuff about the dignity of mankind, and womankind, personhood, whatever. It's so funny because right over your right shoulder is Daniel Pink's book, Drive, which talks about intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
Work is right at the heart of intrinsic motivation, that you have some autonomy in the way that you do your work, that you get to actually look back every day and see that you've done something, and that you can develop mastery in that. And that is what I think that the dignity of humankind is on. I'm such a big believer that work really empowers us to be our best selves. And whether that's the work to design and build a Collaboratory, or whether it's the work in changing the way that owners start thinking about, wow, I can actually participate in this process. I'm not a hopeless victim of fate. I think it's that thing rings in my. Will Lichtig said one time, are we hopeless victims of fate? And he had that hook-nosed bird from the plague, that was the mask of death. And I'm always going, it just seems so wrong that we seem to think that we are, in fact, just hopeless victims of fate. So I appreciate everything you're doing in that space. And I need to get you up here because you're a great motivator. You're a great pioneer. But you just keep pushing the frontier. I mean, you are the quintessential Westerner. You know, if you think about Frederick Turner and the end of the frontier in 1891, no, frontier's not ended. You're still out there pushing it. So I appreciate so much you taking the time today with all our technological difficulties and everything else for joining the podcast. And thanks for all that you have done. You're just one of my idols out there. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Dick, it is always an absolute pleasure to have an opportunity to talk with you. And I don't know, it's just so much fun. And, it's just like there's such synergy in how our brains are wired that it truly is. When I hear you say things like change a country or build a new country, I'm like, I'm in. Let's do that, Dick. Let's do that. I'm in.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, let's make that happen.
Cool. Let's do that. I'm in. Yeah.
All right, we're going to get you up here. This is, I live in a place that most Americans don't know exists, even though it's the capital of Canada. And if they know it is the capital of Canada, they have no idea where it is. So it's safe. It's safe to be here. No one will discover our revolution as we change an entire country. So once again, best to you and the family. And thank you so much for taking the time. And let's not wait so long next time.
Yeah, very good. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year to you. Thanks, Barb. And good luck out there.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lean Construction Blogs podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please help us spread the word by sharing, subscribing, or leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. Remember to join us next time as we continue to lower the barriers to applying lean construction and help take your lean journey to the next level. And don't forget to visit the Lean Construction blog to stay up to date on our latest podcast episodes, weekly blog posts, monthly webinars, and upcoming conferences. We hope to see you on the next episode.